and I think it's Dave. Is it Dave coming up? Yes, both of you. So just as a brief intro, at the start of the year we asked members to tell us issues that particularly interest them and that they'd like to see on the work programme, and so empty homes was one that came up at the start of this year. So we thought that we'd just kick off any work we do on that with an overview of what the situation is in the borough, and also to give us some thoughts about where we might want to look further. And so thanks very much for the paper, which is really interesting, and I'll leave it over to you to give us a brief intro and run us through this.
Okay. Well, it's interesting for me as well, because it's only in the last couple of months that what we've tried to do with the restructure, we've pulled together elements of the work in the council that brings all the voids together. So that's now come into the asset management team. So some of this was just new to me as well, and it's still fairly new. But I'd like just to run through, just highlight the two recommendations here, and the recommendations, and I'll talk through the paper as best I can for you and take the questions. But the committee asked to note the efforts being made by the council to minimise our voids of council homes and also tackle those in the private sector. And also, Yinka here tonight runs the council void programme, which is the and there's been some really sterling work over the last 3 or 4 years in tackling council voids and bringing the levels down in terms of how long they take to get back into use and the cost and other elements of that. So I'd like you to see some of the performance figures here that we have about the reletting of council homes, and more pointedly improving the satisfaction of customers' satisfaction with the process, and also the final void that they then take us up as their home going forward. Obviously there's a great demand for council properties, and so there's an incentive for us to make sure our voids are turned around very quickly, and also to a condition where people actually want to move into those voids going forward. There's also demand in the private sector as well. We do have a number of a lot of private sector properties that are vacant, which can cause problems going forward in terms of local communities and local neighbourhoods. And we do see that when you get private properties, it can impact on antisocial behaviour and other issues there for the community. I'd like to first of all just talk about the empty council homes progress. There are, I would say, 3 types of voids that we have as empty council homes, which are the minor voids, which is a team that Yinka deals with, and that's the ones that come in quite quickly, need minimum amounts of works and get turned around quite quickly as well, and can be brought as minor voids to us for a variety of different reasons. We have major voids that are more substantial works in those properties, and they could be major voids for again variety of reasons. It could be substance, and on that basis we're waiting for insurance claims. It could be a fire damage. It could be a number of different reasons. But the major voids need substantially more work to be carried out, and they has previously sit in the major works teams. Before, Yinka used to manage the casual voids and the minor voids through her teams, using different contractors, and the major works were run by what was the major works team at that time. And then we have the long-term empty council home properties. These are the ones that have been decanted for a variety of reasons. They could be because we're going to do refurb on them, so Lakenhall, and for the reasons why Lakenhall was vacant because of the very unfortunate incidents down there a number of years ago, but also Maydew House, where we are now looking to do major refurbishment of Maydew House and also build on top of that. And then you have the other ones, for instance the Aylesbury, which are part of a regeneration programme anyway. Those long-term empty council homes are used for TA accommodation going forward, which also helps the general fund, because obviously the general fund pays for TA accommodation, so anything we can do to ease that temporary accommodation element through our long-term empty council homes is a benefit. So we have different statistics on here, and I think the telling ones for us in the last 3 years have been the turnaround of voids, our casual voids and our major voids, and especially not just turning them around, but the standard we're now doing those voids up to, and the satisfaction that we have had with the condition of those properties when people have taken them home as over as their home. And we're up to November 2015 at 96% now satisfied, and 94% satisfied with the lettings and the process of allocations that goes through. We put a table in here as well for TMO, tenants management organisations, and we don't deal with those. They're dealt with on the ground by the TMO, but we do record and we do look at their stats as well and regularly review those. As people may know, and I'm not so away with this because this part of it won't come over to my team, but the management team are seen as the top performing councils that deals with illegal sublettings, and we are right up there in top quartile in dealing with illegal subletting. And you will see again that the recovery rate that we have as a council, which is very good, and we've seen and we've had people come to us, talk to us about how we do it and the process that we have in place. As part of the restructure I mentioned earlier, one of the things that happened is the private sector empty homes and private sector grants team is now coming into asset management in terms of our own in our asset management team. They were previously in environment and leisure, they're now coming back into asset management. So it is an important move, because what it means, there are some synergies about what they do and what we do. So for instance, where they're providing age adaptations for people to stay in their homes in the private sector, we do that for our own tenants as well. So there's some synergies to make sure those processes work together, and there's some efficiencies as well to be gained in bringing those teams together. The private sector team has been done very well in recent years. Since 2013, brought in 250 properties back into use in the private sector, and also in doing so has created 35 new additional homes. I don't know if people know, I think down at East Dulwich, where the first concrete house ever to be built, a pre-formed concrete house inside a church, I think that was CPO through the private sector team, and is now being developed by Hexham House Associations to bring houses or shared ownership homes back into the borough. So some quite good work with those, but always more work to carry out on that section. And in doing so, there's a number of options we do. We offer advice, we offer some funding options to private owners whose properties are vacant, and obviously through these we do have nomination rights, and there's other ways we can use our powers in terms of CPOs and other ways like that. So if we feel we can't actually offer grants and make a difference and enable private owners to bring their voids back into let, we have other statutory powers we can use, and that has been successful in the past. The numbers aren't great in those areas because the process of it is quite long, but we won't turn our back on actually dealing with those and actually using their powers where we can. There's some details here about council tax and discounts and exceptions, which I think some of that going to council assembly in January this month. And at the back there is a schedule from benchmarking, and Yinka may say a bit more about this if you so wish. Trouble with benchmarking on voids is different organisations use different criteria. One of the things that both Yinka and I will be doing looking forward, now the teams come back into asset management, we have some very good contact with the Housing Association movement, with other local authorities. I think we want to get more of a defined benchmark for us as a council in London. You know, we've got Lewisham Council and Lambeth Council, very much the same as us. We've got ourselves who operate in our borough that have substantial stock. I would like to try to do some more sensible benchmarking for us to actually get cost of voids, time for relets, and make sure we're all benchmarking on the same basis. So I think for us going forward, that's one of the tasks we'll be looking at within the new asset management team. That's a quick run through. We'll try and answer any questions if we can.
Thanks very much. I'm going to open up to questions. I've got Eleanor, I've got Ben, I've got Damien, and if you could both just chip in on the bits that are relevant to you. Eleanor?
Okay, thanks, Tom. So looking at the time it takes to kind of clear a void, say that table on the back page.
Yeah.
Why do you think Southwark is, I mean, it is performing badly there? And, you know, particularly I noticed that Lambeth Living's at 19 days. Now, I imagine that the stock in Lambeth is quite similar to our stock. When I'm in Lambeth, it looks quite similar. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on that.
Okay. I think the way when Yinka made, because he was involved before I was, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, the decision was a lot of our stock was taking even longer to get there. And when it was, the satisfaction was very low. So the decision was made to improve the standard of the minor voids works. So we now decorate properties, we now do electrical tests and rewire electrics, we do kitchens and bathrooms, we bring it up to a decent home standard. Is that?
It is. And also the criteria that we use is different from other local authorities. For instance, our minor voids include rewiring. Other organisations don't count rewiring as a minor void. It goes into a major voids board, which is why Dave said that we have to do some kind of like-for-like benchmarking so that we can get accurate benchmarking. Because at the moment, although everybody says they do minor voids in a certain time, the criteria differs from every organisation.
Can I ask you something else? Yeah. And when you say we're doing it, does the council have its own team? Do you go out to standard council contractors? Because something I've often heard on cases where I'm waiting for a resident to be put into a void is there's delays with the contractors and there's problems kind of getting people in to do the rewiring. So how do you deal with that?
We have 2 contractors. We use the council's in-house SBS, and we also use Mayor's contractors. Mayor's use a subcontractor to do their rewiring, and SBS mainly use their own. But if we have a lot of voids, then they might call in subcontractors as well to try and speed up the turnaround.
I think one of the tasks that's been given to me from our Strategic Director of Housing and Modernisation is to look at the voids turnaround in terms of the contracts we use and the cost. And what we would look to do as well, we have the 2 partner contractors, MEAS and SBS, but I think there's some real merits in us going out with a framework as well to see what other contractors are out there to actually do a balance of costs, because you know, void works is quite good work for external contractors. So I think what we will be looking to do in the next 6 to 9 months is go out for a tender to have that as well to use going forward.
Carl, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, just on the benchmarking, I think that it's important not to just measure it on, it's just a comment really, that on the time that it takes to turn around a void. I mean, surely the things that should be included should be the time that it takes to turn it around, the cost that you just mentioned. And also if people are more, I noticed that people get twice to look at the property before they go in, which you say in the report leads to more satisfaction. That may in the long run be more cost effective. So I think if it does get to the stage where you're benchmarking against other organisations, I think it would be useful just to take other big things into account.
We were finding, I think, early days, what was happening, the voids have been turned around quick and the lettings were then really stringing out. So what we tried to do is that balance between good quality void, turn around as quick as we can, very, very house standards, just squeeze and the letting, because we get first lettings and people take them straight away, where before you used to get 2 or 3 people going round and they won't get let. Then you get vacancies and then you get everything that goes with that.
Another follow-up on this. I think we'll stick with benchmarking and we'll move on. In terms of other boroughs, especially I think like Lambeth and Lewisham and so on, what work do you see going on with them to try and get comparable figures? Is it something you think they'll be willing to participate in, or are there, you know, will they see this as us trying to get access to data to make ourselves look better?
Well, I think separately I set up benchmarking groups before with small similar type organisations, and I think if you can convince them that there's benefits to them, that benchmarking will show where they could change their processes or where they can take advantage of different contract prices. You know, the cost of our voids should be no different to the cost of the voids in Lambeth if we're doing the same standard. So I think it's showing where the benefits are. I think we need to, the trouble is this is the house mark, which this takes in Manchester organisations, Liverpool organisations and places like in Cornwall. We want to perhaps a tighter group that are more relevant to us in London where we are. And if we can show the benefits, I think they're more likely to be engaged. So I do think there's some there'll be some mileage in going around and talking to those partners to see how we can work together to make sure we're judging on a like-for-like basis, really.
Okay, moving on, Ben.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting report. I'm particularly interested in private sector empty homes. The kind of focus here seems to be mostly on those that need repair work and refurbishment. But there's certainly anecdotal evidence of a growing problem with homes being bought as investments, kind of seen as a safe investment, particularly in new blocks. Sometimes buy to let, but at other times kind of buy to leave. So they're just left empty. I don't know if you have any specific data on that, or indeed how you calculate the 2,050 homes, whether that's through council tax or something else. And then a kind of follow on question. I think the changes in council tax are really good to discourage those. I wonder, just as an open-ended question, if you have any other ideas for measures that could be used to tackle that.
Well, I think the private sector side of it is very new to me. The team haven't yet come over. We have an officer at the moment looking to see how the two teams can be brought together. They're currently based in our Queen's Road office. They'll be coming back to Tully Street here. I think I can come back to committee when that process is more forward, and also take those questions back to see, because I think some of the buy-to-lets and the buy-to-leave vacant we haven't recorded in here.
Okay.
But certainly, I think certainly as more properties are developed on the riverside and some of those newer properties, that will have an impact, because they could be sitting there vacant.
Yeah, that would be great if you could do a little report or something to follow up. That'd be great.
And I think on that, it's really interested to know on that point whether the number empty are going up as a result. You know, so as more are built, are we seeing more empty new builds as a result? And so once that team comes together,
I think there might be other strands of the council we need to involve in that as well. I think certainly through planning team.
Yeah.
There'll be some interest in that as well.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm just going to make a note to invite the planning team. I think that private sector voids is something I think there's some considerable interest in on the committee, and we will, we're trying to make this quite a wide look at voids. I think that's one in particular that we'd like to see more. And so we'll speak to planning, and maybe you and I have a chat about what teams we might want to hear from other bits of the council, and a
timescale to bring that to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Any follow-ups on that point, Damien?
Just a very quick one, just to clarify these numbers, if I may. I noticed that the average days void to let for minor and average days void to let major, if you look at last year, it's 13.16 days for the major, 43.6 days for the minor. Now I'm assuming that with the major voids, you're able to sort of like trail the fact that this void is about to come back online. Therefore, it's just in completion, and therefore you can set up and get people in quite quickly. With the minor voids, you kind of have to wait for the work to be done. But while those numbers make sense to me, I don't understand then the benchmarking stuff, because if you look at the major voids to minor voids, if I'm reading this right, which I probably am, the numbers are quite close all of a sudden. Am I just misreading this? In other words, are the datums that you're measuring from and to, are they the same in both of those tables?
Yeah.
So average minor void relet time, the median is 31.36, but for major it's 75.05. So are we talking about from the time that you go in there and start the work on the property? So they're two different.
They're two
They're two
different. I think they're two different.
metrics.
They're actually two different. One's about the letting of property on completion. These are about the number of days of void from when it become empty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's what I think we need to. I think we need to tie down benchmarking our own reporting KPIs as well to make sure they're consistent throughout.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry for that.
Okay, quick question on EDMOs versus CPOs. EDMO is something I personally have come into contact with outside of London, and I get that, for example, these figures here in note number 8, so that it's actually quite expensive in Southwark. But the paragraph suggests that we think of these as an either or, and are there some circumstances in which we would do EDMOs, or are they considered when properties come up, or have we sort of decided that CPO is our usual way of working?
They are considered, but CPO seems to be the normal route we would take.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there are very few of those though carried out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, Eleanor?
So back to council voids, if that's okay. Perhaps a bit of a simple question, but is it always clear when a void's a void? Now, obviously, if there's someone living by themselves and they've died, that's a clear-cut case. But again, anecdotally, I know of a lot of cases where neighbours will say, "Oh, he's never here," or "His son turns up once a month." And do you think there's a kind of gap there, working with housing officers, to actually identify voids in those kind of cases?
Housing officers routinely do tenancy checks and pick up on issues on their estate, but where somebody sometimes would come and say, "Oh, I'd like to be offered a property at number 7," we then make inquiries with the resident officers, and sometimes they're able to say, "Oh, well, it's not empty because the tenant is actually in hospital, they've been in hospital for a few months and they'll be returning and stuff," or what have you. So there is that connection. We work very closely with them. We have access to the files, so we check as well. We know what properties are coming up. We ask people to give us 4 weeks notice. So most of our voids, a lot of times we know to expect them. When people randomly hand in keys, we check to make sure if the resident officers are aware of it in advance or what have you. And they also will say to us when they go out on their estates and they notice properties that might be vacant, they might check with us to see if that's been handed in, if it's actually a void, or if they need to do further inquiries to find out where the tenant is. So there is that dialogue that keeps going around just to ascertain if properties are just lying empty. And neighbours usually do come forward and tell us if they haven't seen anybody going in and out of the property. So if they inform the resident officers, they come to us. If they inform us, we refer back to the resident officers so that we can make sure we follow up on that. And if it's indeed a void, then we can take charge of it as quickly as possible.
So moving back again to council tax discounts and exemptions, point 28. So first bullet point about the changes that come to council assembly tomorrow night. Now that has implications for the HRA, as you know, around cost to the council for its own properties being empty during those 2 months. So I suppose having seen all this great information about satisfaction rates going up and the process you've got in place to ensure that properties are handed over to residents in a state that they are pleased with, do you feel that your department will come under any pressure there to avoid some of these council tax costs? I don't want those numbers to slip because we're rushing people in.
No.
Having had this great improvement that we see in the table on page 6.
Yeah. I think the Strategic Director of Housing and Modernisation is sort of adamant that the voids we bring back have got to be voids and homes that people want to live in. So I think the standard of what we expect and what I think our residents deserve and expect as well has to be maintained. What we need to do is make the process slicker. And so our work in the next few months is working towards how we can do that, and some of that may be we spoke about perhaps going out to tender as well for some more players in there that help us turn the voids around. So the standards won't slip. We think we will still, if our standards slip, then our lettings process will increase and we will suffer, and we can't afford that. So we need to be lot slicker on that process of the construction and being on site and turn around quickly and make sure that properties we finish are fit for people to use, and we keep the same satisfaction rate. So we won't be under pressure to devalue standards.
Thank you. Any more questions from anyone? No.
I might ask my final.
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't ask you for this, but if imagine you had an unlimited budget, what would you spend it on to improve the void service?
At the moment, we're doing virtually everything. We're decorating, we're making good. So, other than probably putting carpets down, there isn't really much else we do or we need to do in our voids, because we are really doing a very high standard. I think we're the only authority in London that decorate for tenants and what have you. So yeah.
I think though when if we look to carve down the prices, our voice price is quite high.
Yeah.
If we look through efficiencies in procurement and other things, carve down the price, then you put a wish list in about what else you could do.
Yeah.
So for instance, on our new build properties, which we do, we put blinds up. There'll be nothing worse than people moving in a new home, kind of put curtains up. So at least we put blinds up to stop that. Now whether that's something we need to think about going forward, I think that's on the back of we make efficiency savings elsewhere. But certainly that things like that may be more about making it home as opposed to just the standard. But the standard Inca now carries out on those, bringing it up to decent homes. It is a very good standard.
And just one final point from me. We're next, after the break, we'll be hearing from Lee about the resident-led services now. The TMO numbers in here suggest that where there are sort of separate organisations handing properties back and forth to each other, that does create a little bit of a time delay. And I just wonder where we've got resident-led services in Camberwell, Peckham and Walworth going forward in those pilots, whether or not that may have an impact on some of the turnaround times, and whether that's something that you're already thinking about. We'll come back to it with Lee possibly later if there's anything to add. But yeah,
I think it depends what group there are as well. I think if we're looking at the leather market, perhaps to deal with a lot themselves, their figures would be in here.
Sorry, if I can
please do.
What we're looking at the moment in those areas will not create a separate organisation in the way that we have tenant management organisations. So it shouldn't really have minimal impact on all of the daily things.
That's good, and I'm aware they're all going to look different as well. So it's probably early stage, but yeah, just wanted to check. Any last points before we move on?
One very quick, and I know you're not be able to comment because it's a TMO one, but did you notice the average days ready to let for the TMOs? It goes from 18.7 to 29.2 to 74. I know you may have absolutely no comment on that whatsoever.
I haven't, but we can check those figures.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the report author and talk to him about where those figures come up from.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much for coming along and for the report. And you and I will talk outside of the meeting. So thanks for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.